All right, getting into a very talented 2023 rookie class. There are a lot of guys that are projected to go now in the 3rd and 4th round of Dynasty rookie drafts that we think you should be taking a look at and taking a shot at when it comes time to draft these rookies onto your Dynasty team. We're going to look at all those guys with Jeremy today. He has joined us on the show. First, make sure you like this video and make sure you subscribe to the channel. We've got content like this coming out all offseason, Dynasty content, rookie content, etc. Make sure you head over to our Locals page and check out our Discord. We got listener leagues open now, so if you want to get in a league with us, make sure you jump over to Locals. We've got a couple open now. You can jump up in and play some Dynasty with us. All right, Jeremy, back. Obviously, he knows everything about rookies that there ever was to know, so we got to bring him on to tell us everything.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, it's just crazy. But especially, actually, legitimately, I was like, we need to have Jeremy for this video because I don't know if I can talk about these guys for 20 minutes, and Jeremy could probably talk about one of them for 20 minutes. So we're going to go through here and just go through these names that we've picked out. It's really early in the process. So we absolutely realize that. I think this is going to change. I think some of these guys that are sleepers are going to jump up into being not sleepers. I think some of these guys that are sleepers are going to end up being overdrafted because everybody's going to get high on them at the same time. So you have to take this with a grain of salt. But these are kind of the guys that are not popular names right now that you're probably not hearing a ton of that we think are going to be true sleepers in this 2023 rookie cycle. The first one being TaiJ Spears. Now, if you're on Dynasty Twitter, you're probably like, TaiJ Spears isn't really a sleeper anymore because everybody's been in on him. Well, outside of Dynasty Twitter, you're not hearing a whole lot about TaiJ Spears. Out of Tulane, and it's kind of funny. Jeremy did a thread, I think, on TaiJ Spears, and the athletic director and the head coach and the assistant coach of Tulane was actually retweeting Jeremy's stuff, which is kind of cool. But Jeremy, tell us a little bit about what you kind of dove into with TaiJ Spears. I know you've looked at him in depth. I know he's being picked as a popular sleeper in the running back position, maybe working his way up some ranks. So tell us what you like about him and why he's kind of starting to get some more attention from people on Twitter in Dynasty.
Well, I think you're right. I think he still categorizes as a sleeper because, I don't know, 4 days ago, a lot of people probably didn't even know who TaiJ Spears was before the Senior Bowl happened. He came in at the Senior Bowl 5'9.5", 204 though, so he weighed in over 200 pounds, which was a big threshold for him as a smaller running back. So you like to see that. Overall, though, for TaiJ Spears, he suffered an ACL injury his sophomore year in college, and most times, even in the NFL, it takes you a year to really get back to being the running back that you were after an ACL injury. So this senior year, he kind of came out. His last 8 games of the season, he had 130 carries for over 1,200 yards, 12 touchdowns, I think, and then a receiving touchdown as well. So, I mean, he played really well the last 2 months of the season. Another thing that I really like about him is his scheme versatility. So if you look at all the 2023 running backs in this class, he is the most even split between zone running schemes and gap running schemes. So that means that he's going to be able to plug and play in whatever offense that he's going to be drafted to, and he's going to be efficient as soon as it starts up. Yeah, I think he's one of the best receiving backs in this class. You see a lot of tape of him working the sideline, getting his toes down. He works the slot pretty well. But yeah, he's really good. He's really good at a lot of facets of the game when it comes to running the ball too. So yeah. I like TaiJ Spears.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was probably about a month ago where I first started kind of looking into Spears, looking at his film for the first time. And I remember we did a little video on some running backs to look at when we were doing a mock draft. And I was saying hey, TaiJ Spears is one of these guys that could definitely jump up draft boards. Jeremy, you were on that before any of us were. But I mean, from the first day that I watched his film, it was, one of those guys, one of those college prospects where you're like, whoa, he has, he has explosiveness that, I mean, you would never have guessed that he tore his ACL his sophomore season. He was so good, so efficient, so effective as a rusher this past season, his senior year at Tulane, and really liked what I saw. Obviously, his biggest moment was going to be, tearing up USC.
in
the bowl game,
defense.
but honestly, like you said, USC's running defense just wasn't that great. So kind of look beyond that, look at what he was able to do throughout the season, dive into more of his film. See what you guys think about him. Let us know what you think about him in the comments. If you think that he could be jumping up draft boards, going higher in the NFL draft than we may even think, but he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on. And so far, I mean, everything that you've said, Jeremy, is exactly why I really, really like him as a prospect. There is a potential, though, like Avery has said, there is a risk that he could be overdrafted and too heavily invested in before the NFL draft even comes. Because, I mean, the flip side is TaiJ Spears could become one of those draft day darlings where regardless of where he goes in the NFL draft, people will continue to be high on him. We saw that with every QB in last year's rookie class. And, of course, none of them did anything because they didn't have the draft capital. If TaiJ Spears doesn't get respectable draft capital, there's only so high he can go in Dynasty in terms of value. So be careful of that for sure.
You took my talking point. Now I have nothing to say. But I guess I'll start with Eric Gray. Eric Gray is going to be our next sleeper. And, hyper productive at Oklahoma this year. This is a guy that Simon Denny Domain, S. Denny, Simon. He really liked Eric Gray Eric Gray. But to be fair, I don't think Simon's ever watched a rookie that he's not been like, wow, that guy. So I took it with a grain of salt when Simon sent me his name. But, I mean, look at what he did at Oklahoma this year. In 12 games, he had 213 rushing attempts for 1,364 yards. He also had 33 receptions for 229 yards. That's really good. And obviously you're looking at that. He's playing in the Big 12. He's playing at Oklahoma, which is obviously a great football school, a great program. You know, he transferred in from Tennessee 2 years ago. He didn't do much there, and he honestly didn't do much last year, so he really did break out this year as a 23-year-old. And that's probably the biggest red flag, I think, with Eric Gray. I think, it took him a while to do a whole lot, and now that he has, I mean, he looks really good, but I don't think that NFL teams are necessarily going to be jumping over one another to go get Eric Gray. I think he's probably going to get day 3 capital, maybe day 2, probably day 3 capital. It's just going to really depend on how he ends up testing out in the combine. Again, we saw he can be efficient on touches like that. We saw that he can produce. I haven't watched a whole lot of his film, Jeremy. I'm curious your thoughts on Eric Gray. I know you've watched some Eric Gray film. I think he's another guy that's gotten a little bit of notoriety on Dynasty Twitter.
So Eric Gray was a huge name in like the Devy community when he at Tennessee. Because he had a lot of the same similarities of another former Tennessee running back, Alvin Kamara, that he was the guy that was a good receiving threat out of the backfield. At the Senior Bowl, he came in at 5'9", 210. That's really good BMI for that height. But he kind of suffered from the inefficiency of the overall offensive scheme there at Tennessee. I mean, Cedric Tillman suffered from it. Jalen Hyatt suffered from it. Overall, for those first couple of years that he was there at Tennessee, it just wasn't good. And a lot of people thought that him going to Oklahoma last season with Lincoln Riley as the head coach, that he was going to take that next step and probably declare last season. It just didn't work out that way. Kennedy Brooks kind of kept him off the field a little bit, and the receiving upside wasn't really there. This year, though, he was the lead back, and like you said about his stats, he was really good. There's a clip going around from him at the Senior Bowl of him catching a ball on the flat, and he gives this crazy, like, dead leg jab step. He's really flashed his ability to be a receiving back, and definitely did it at the Senior Bowl. And a lot of analysts were speaking very highly of him after his Senior Bowl tape. So Eric Gray, like you said, I think he's probably going to end up being a J3 pick, if I had to guess, but there's a possibility to be a J2 guy just because of how highly touted he was early on in his career.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting seeing him. Not only is he just he's more than just a simple like receiving back. Like they used him as a receiver in some of those plays at Oklahoma. Like he would be in the slot and like running routes, like basically everything we hoped that Antonio Gibson would be going into the NFL and with Washington is kind of like what I saw with Eric Gray, that could be his potential upside if they used him as a receiver in the NFL. The problem is I just don't know if that's going to happen. Like you said already, Avery, the age and just, his running ability is good. It's okay. There's some really promising film out there, some really promising plays where you see him, run between the tackles, and then all of a sudden he finds this gap, he finds this hole, and I mean, boom, he's gone. He makes this crazy cut, very explosive, and then he gets 20 yards out of it. But then, it was interesting to see his usage in that Oklahoma offense. And, whether that be out of the backfield or in the slot, I mean, they even went deep, targeting Eric Gray sometimes on the outside. Like you said, Jeremy, that could be intriguing in this day and age for some NFL teams, especially seeing a guy like James Cook go in the second round, targeting him. And he didn't really do a ton in college. Yeah, and he's not that great, but people in the NFL looked at him and it was enough for him to still go in the second round. So for Gray, I think that's definitely a guy to keep an eye on, and to see that he is able to be utilized as an actual receiver is pretty cool. So,
yeah, absolutely. All right, our next guy here is going to be Xavier Hutchinson. I think were you the one that said this, or was Simon the one that suggested Xavier Hutchinson?
It was probably him.
Simon.
Yeah. I don't think I think Simon is really high on just about everybody but here. But obviously Xavier Hutchinson out of Iowa State. He's got great hands. He's a bigger guy, so he's a bigger wide receiver. I think this is somebody maybe, he's still only 22 years old. I think this is somebody maybe that actually legitimately could jump up in rookie drafts by the end of this. I'd like to hear your thoughts, Jeremy, on his kind of skill set and the tools that he has. I think some of the intangibles are there, and I think I think at the end of the day, some of these wide receivers that are considered sleepers right now aren't necessarily going to be sleepers here in 3 months. But talk a little bit about his game and why he could potentially have the tools to jump up.
So it's interesting because he's listed on the state website at 6'3", 210.
Yep.
And at the Senior Bowl, he was measured at 6'5", 205. He lost 1.5 inches from his time playing at college, the time that he's measured at the Senior Bowl. So that knocks him a little bit, because while obviously is him as like an receiver, and that's not how big he is actually. So that knocks him a little bit. He played in a junior college, so he played at Blaine College, so it's the same college that Cam Newton played at after he got kicked off the Florida team for laptops. So he was there for a couple of years, and then he transferred to Iowa State. He's been good at Iowa State. I believe he had like 160 targets this year or something insane like that. So when you're talking about overall target share of an offense, you're talking about a 40% target share for Xavier Hutchinson this year.
It's crazy.
So yeah, I mean, he had a good year. He's a late breakout guy. So when you're looking at like the analytical community, a lot like people don't like the late breakout, but he also didn't have like a ton of opportunity to break out because, like I just said, he was playing junior college the first 2 years of his college career.
Yeah.
He's pretty scheme versatile though. Like they line him up all over the field and stuff like that. His hands are pretty good. He's pretty decent at high pointing the ball, but that would be a lot more appealing of a skill set had he had been 6'3" as opposed to him being 6'1.5". So that's just something to keep in mind that I think that could dock him a little bit. And he had a relatively quiet week at the Senior Bowl as well. So if you're not talked about a lot at the Senior Bowl as like a standout wide receiver, it's a little concerning that you would think if you were a very good receiver at the Senior Bowl, people would be having a hard time covering you, or you would be standing out, and that's not really any of the reports we heard from about Xavier Hutchinson.
Yeah, that's funny that you said that about his height, because all I could think of when I was watching him and then thinking about his size was like, he's 6'3", 210. He has 10 pounds, or he's supposed to have 10 pounds on QJ, and he's just an inch shorter than QJ, but he does not play big at all. And in terms of like contested catchability, it's not really there. He doesn't elevate like I would expect for a guy that was supposed to be as big as he was. So that's definitely telling, seeing that he's much smaller than we expected him to be. I will say a positive for him is I was really impressed with his separation, not just in his route running, but when the ball is coming to him. And from a contested catchability, he doesn't have that vertical contested catchability, but he is able to separate and get the ball and get his hands on the ball away from the corner like with ease. And it's really, really encouraging and really fun to watch him do that on the outside. I would say a lot of his catches that he has are impressive. He's not afraid to lay out. And while I do like parts of that, it is funny to me that like a lot of times that he does lay out and catch the ball, it's almost like he's not tracking it super well, because he always like he'll always lay out in like a really contorted way where it's like you didn't really have to do that. You had plenty of time to track the ball and to adjust your body and your position on the field, and you just like you had to lay out like 3 feet to your left or something, and then you didn't get a chance to, you know, get the extra yard because you had to go to the ground. He definitely seems to me to go down pretty easily. I think he kind of over anticipates contact, especially in the middle of the field. When he's targeted in the middle of the field, he goes down somewhat easily. Again, with his size that we know him to be now, that's a bit more understandable. So my expectations kind of change. I just hope that he's a little bit faster come combine because of that.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to Izzy Abanikanda. This is a guy that I actually like a lot. I think this will be the guy I like that's a value guy in these rookie drafts if Spears moves up. So with Izzy, I think there's a lot to be said about his production as a rusher. You know, obviously 240 rushing attempts this year. He had 1,400 yards, 21 total touchdowns this year, which is just bananas. But looking at what he kind of, profiles as a complete player in football, he's a very good rusher. I think he bounces off of defenders. I think he's got good acceleration. He's not necessarily a burner, but I think he gets it done on the ground. I think there's a lot of concern about his ability to route run. I think some of that may be a little bit premature, although he only did have 12 receptions this year for 150 yards. I mean, we saw with Kenneth Walker, who was a very good rusher in college, but didn't have very much receiving upside at Michigan State, that he actually, was able to get enough receiving touches in Seattle that kind of helped his production have a higher floor. So I think obviously he's a lot less talented than Kenneth Walker, and obviously he's not super big either. He's 5'11". He's at least got the weight. He's 215 pounds, so he's got a 30 BMI. He's only 20 years old, so that is also nice. He's young. He obviously, his breakout age, 20 years old is nothing compared to Eric Gray's 23. I mean, he's got 3 years on the guy. So thoughts on Izzy Abanikanda, Jeremy?
I think he could run a pretty good 40 time. Actually, his high school, he was an all-state high school track runner in New York. He went to Abraham Lincoln High School in the Bronx. So he does have pretty good speed, and like you just said, for 5'11", 215, I mean that's a big guy to be running the kind of 40 I anticipate him running. I think he probably runs like mid 4.4s, high 4. I think he'll be lower than 4.5 though, for sure. I think he'll hit that 4.4 range. Like you said, 12 catches for 150 or whatever yards. I mean, that's a pretty good yards per reception as well. Yep. So he wasn't asked to do it a ton, but when he did get the opportunity, he was efficient with the opportunity. I think, like you said, 20 years old with that size, that kind of athleticism. I think Israel Abanikanda is going to be moving up the boards a little bit, and if he doesn't, because of how deep the class is overall at the running back position, I like you said, he's going to be one of the best values in the third round at the running back position for sure.
Yep.
Yeah. So are you concerned in any way just that it took him until his junior year to really produce at a high level? Because it took the exit of Kenny Pickett, who threw 500 passes for 4,300 passing yards, to Keaton Slovis throwing 2,800 yards this season on 391 attempts. Like the passing volume just wasn't there, which kind of forced them to run the ball more. And that just makes me wonder, was Izzy special enough to even be a factor before this and they just didn't choose to use him, or is he really not as good as we might think? Do you think that's a concern at all? What do you think, Avery?
I actually think the Kenny Pickett argument is something that you could make an argument that is a good reason.
That's helpful for him?
Yeah,
okay.
because
I could see that side as well.
Because Kenny Pickett was such a dominant force at Pitt, and because he was being used so much, his usage rate was so high, like I think you could make the argument that that's why Izzy wasn't getting as many touches, he wasn't producing at that level, is because that offense was Kenny Pickett. I mean, and obviously Jordan Addison as well. But I think there's an argument to be made that, once they actually had a more balanced offense in terms of, passing and running ratios, at his first opportunity as a 20-year-old, he got his own. So I think that you could use that argument both ways. Because he's only 20, I know it's his junior year, but he's only 20 years old. I'm okay with it. I mean, I like him a lot more than I like Brian Robinson, and Brian Robinson didn't break out till he was like 22, 23. Been in Alabama forever, so again, him being 20 coming into the league, yeah, I'm fine with it. I think I'm not necessarily concerned. Jeremy, I don't know if you're concerned about that either. I think that's still a pretty young breakout age.
Different offense as well. Mark Whipple was the offensive coordinator during Kenny Pickett's last season, and he left and went to Nebraska. So completely different offensive scheme. They didn't run the ball as much. Keaton Slovis is obviously a cut below Kenny Pickett in terms of college quarterback. So I think that's probably why we saw Abanikanda break out this year as opposed to last year, because they just had more viable weapons to use.
Yeah.
So I'm not overly concerned about it.
Yeah. All right. Puka Nacua. This is a guy that you guys were talking about off air and that you've watched more film on than me, so I'm going to let you start with him, and then I'll let Jeremy touch on him.
Okay, yeah. So Puka's a guy coming out of BYU. He was the clear alpha receiver there. Obviously, his stats this past year, from a quantity standpoint, aren't going to look amazing. Only 48 receptions and 625 yards, but again, he only played 9 games. I think he struggled with a little bit of injury towards the beginning of the season, but it is he has a lot of skill sets that are oddly, like Jeremy has said, is oddly reminiscent of the way Deebo Samuel is being used in the NFL right now, where they actually use him in the run game. I mean, he's getting upwards of 6 attempts in a game this past season for 20 yards and 2 touchdowns. They're giving him those carries in the red zone because he does have some of that speed and explosiveness in the backfield. They can use him on jet sweeps, and it's really effective for their offense. From a receiving game perspective, I mean, he's a solid deep threat and a big body that can really go up on those contested catch opportunities and bring the ball down. When I watched him, he reminded me a lot of Alec Pierce, and I think he could definitely build off that in the NFL. He'd be more, in my opinion, more of a project receiver. Could take him a year or two to develop, a bit slower than some of these guys that are going to go higher up in the draft, but he's definitely a receiver and a prospect to keep an eye on, because the production and the usage is there in an offense that's, not renowned for explosive plays or anything like that, but he was able to make something out of not the most opportunities at BYU. So, Jeremy, what do you think about him?
Yeah, I think you covered it pretty well. I just put out a wide receiver thread of a bunch of advanced metrics and stuff, and I was pretty surprised that Puka Nacua was on the majority of the top 10 of each category that I listed. Particularly, he had a very good deep ball receiving grade, and he had a very good behind the line of scrimmage receiving grade. I think he's in the top 7 of both of those per PFF. So
nice.
You're talking about a guy that could be a playmaker at many facets of the field and different areas of it as well. So, like, you're getting Puka Nacua like in the 4th round of rookie. It's very little for a guy that has pretty good upside in terms of how he's been used in college so far.
Yeah, he could easily go up. I mean, the NFL has shown time and time again that production in college is far from everything when it comes to what they're looking at in skill sets in the NFL. And Alec Pierce was probably the biggest example of that last season in the 2nd round going, no, I don't think anyone really expected that, especially going over Sky Moore. And then you saw what he did in his first season as a rookie receiver in a terrible offense, and he was still able to produce at a pretty impressive level for a rookie. So
yeah, absolutely. And then last on here is actually tight end. So we've got Luke Musgrave here. Just looking at a mock that we are actually going to do a video on here, or have done a video on, depending on when we release these. He went at the 231 to the Eagles here. Is where he was mocked to, which I don't really see the Eagles drafting another tight end, but it's still the late second round capital. Something that I've realized looking through these mock drafts is that a lot of these tight ends are projected top 2 rounds. Like, I think this is going to be a particularly talented tight end class in terms of, getting that high draft capital. You're looking at Michael Mayer, you're looking at Dalton Kincaid, and you're looking at Luke Musgrave, and there are even more. Honestly, I think there are 5 guys that are threats to go in the top 2 rounds.
Do they come with burgers and fries?
What did I say? That
5 guys.
Shut up. Cancel this channel. This is so dumb. Obviously, you didn't see a lot of Luke Musgrave this year. I think he only played 2 games, and he was hurt the rest of the year. So I think that's part of the reason maybe why he's flying under the radar a little bit. He is 22. He is 6'5", 255, so he's got that great tight end size. I think he's somebody that, could end up being a good sleeper pick in the 3rd or 4th round. We saw a lot of these rookie tight ends this year end up being like good later picks because they got value and
go up in ADP.
And they go way up in ADP.
Yeah.
I think this is going to be maybe another example of that. If a team like the Packers gets a Luke Musgrave, I think that I would guess that he would be playing over Robert Tonyan at that point. But just wrap us up here, Jeremy, on your thoughts on Luke Musgrave and what makes him appealing as a sleeper this year.
Yeah, it's funny because my comp for him is Dallas Goedert. So I thought it was interesting because the Eagles also drafted Dallas Goedert in the 2nd round of an NFL draft, even though they had Zach Ertz on the roster. He's just a guy that's he's freakishly athletic for the tight end position. So a lot of the knocks on like Michael Mayer is that he's not athletic enough. People think that he's slow and stiff and stuff. That's the exact opposite concern with Luke Musgrave, is that he's able to stretch the field. He's able to do things that you want your tight end in today's NFL to do, especially as a fantasy option. You don't really get points for pancake blocks like George Kittle. You get points for catching the ball and scoring touchdowns. So He only played the 2 games, but a lot of NFL teams really, really like the 2 games that they saw. So I like Luke Musgrave a lot, actually.
I think he's a very safe pick. I think while you see rookie wide receivers are safe picks, I think a lot of times you see picking these rookie tight ends will have some big reward. Because, at the end of the day, we did a video on tight ends and how to value them. The tight ends under 25, a lot of times you're not wanting to heavily invest in those and use those guys as your bell cow tight ends on your dynasty teams. So, I think even if you've got 3rd or 4th round picks as a contender, you can pick up guys like this that are tight ends that have good draft capital and then sell them for something, much greater come time. And even if you wanted to get them 3 years later, probably you could for the same price. So just that's kind of the nature of the tight end position right now in Dynasty. But that kind of wraps us up. These are some guys that we thought, at the current moment could be sleepers. Hopefully we look back in a year and we're like, wow, we were geniuses. But the more likely scenario is we're going to look back in the year and be like, wow, we were meatheads. But we'll see. I think let us know in the comments if you think that any of these guys are sleepers. Let us know in the comments if you even know who any of these guys are, because I can confidently tell you that I had to do my research on a couple of these guys prior to this video. So if you think we're missing anybody, let us know who you also think are sleepers in this year's draft. We'd love to hear some of the in-depth Dynasty Rookie content from you guys as well. Make sure you like the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. We're going to come out with all kinds of Dynasty content for the rest of the offseason, so make sure you jump on there as well. As always, we appreciate you guys listening. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you later.